Welcome back. Today we're diving into a story full of twists, drama, and unforgettable moments. If you enjoy quick movie recaps, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out. In a stormy castle hallway thick with tension, King Uther confronted Princess Morgan with searing fury in his eyes. Her words had cut deep. She'd accused him of cowardice and complacency in front of his own guard, a challenge he could not ignore. Yet Morgan, poised and fearless, stared him down with unflinching defiance. Her boldness wasn't new, it was her weapon. The guard stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene or witness what felt like the unraveling of a delicate alliance. Rather than retaliate physically before them, King Uther made a cruel decision. Without a word, he seized Morgan and dragged her through the corridors, the echoes of her struggle ringing through the stone walls. He wasn't about to punish her with spectacle. He had something far more devastating in mind. He took her deep into the barren wastelands, a place shrouded in ancient stories and the cries of wolves after dark. There, he bound her hands to a wooden pole, her royal garments tattered from the journey. The wasteland was no prison, it was a test. Uther had suspected Morgan's intentions from the beginning, how she had used charm and strategy to manipulate him into striking down King Uther's illegitimate heir, clearing her own path to the throne. But in Uther's mind, she'd underestimated him. This was his move to reassert power, to remind her that control didn't lie in seduction or schemes, but in survival. If Morgan survived the night, then perhaps they could speak of alliances once more. Alone beneath a crescent moon, Morgan wrestled with the cold and the growing mist creeping over the barren ground. But something about the mist felt unnatural. It wasn't the howling of wolves that unsettled her. It was the presence of something far more ancient. From the fog emerged a figure she recognized not by sight, but by the weight of his presence. The dark spirit she had once bargained with for power. The devil, shrouded in smoke and shadows, whispered cryptic warnings. He spoke of betrayal, of consequences, of someone being wrong. But his words were vague, their meaning elusive. Morgan listened, but understood little. Still, the entity did not harm her. Whether out of respect for past dealings or unseen plans, she survived the night unscathed. At dawn, King Uther returned, brushing dust from her cheek like an act of twisted tenderness. He told her nothing, but the message was clear. She had lived, and that meant she had earned the right to continue playing the game. Back at the castle, chaos was brewing. Word had already spread that the ancient sword of the gods had been pulled from its resting place. And not by a noble, not by a high lord, but by Arthur, the rumored illegitimate son of the late King Uther. A boy many had dismissed as irrelevant had now fulfilled a prophecy. Arthur lay unconscious, overwhelmed by the sword's awakening. Beside him stood Merlin, the ever-watchful mage, who declared that Arthur's coronation would take place that very night, no matter the danger. Warriors from across the realm gathered to witness the beginning of a new era. As fate would have it, Morgan arrived at the castle gates just hours before sunset. She bore no weapons, only words, a warning. She informed Merlin of King Uther's impending assault that very evening, and with a cryptic nod, she turned and vanished into the gathering twilight. Merlin, undeterred, ordered preparations. The coronation would proceed, even under the threat of war. By torchlight and beneath ancient banners, Arthur was crowned king before a crowd of hundreds. The sword gleamed at his side. He spoke to his people not with grandeur, but with sincerity. I am Arthur Pendragon, and I will not fail you. His first act as ruler was to appoint his foster brother, Kay, as marshal, and his adoptive father, Lentes, as royal guard, loyal men who had stood by him since birth. The celebration that followed pulsed with joy and hope. Among the revelers, Arthur's eyes found a familiar face, the blonde girl who had once stirred something in him he couldn't name. Her name, he finally learned, was Guinevere. They spoke with ease, laughter mixing with the music as they stepped away from the party and wandered toward a sea-facing terrace. There, the air grew quieter. Guinevere, standing at the edge, gazed into the endless ocean and asked, with a strange glint in her eye, "Would it kill me to jump from here?" Arthur, startled by her vulnerability, joined her at the ledge. For a moment, they were simply two people caught in something neither fully understood. But their moment was broken. Lentes, Arthur's guardian and newly appointed royal guard, arrived, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Arthur, still basking in the glow of newfound affection, went to introduce Guinevere. What he didn't expect was the painful truth. The two already knew each other. They were engaged. The revelation hit Arthur like a blade to the heart. Though he masked his pain behind a polite smile, the heartbreak was impossible to hide. He excused himself, swallowed by the weight of unspoken grief. But there was no time for reflection. The enemy had already entered the castle, hidden in plain sight among the guests. In an instant, the festive hall turned into a battlefield. Merlin rushed Arthur away from danger, while the loyal Lentes drew his weapon to confront King Uther, who had led the ambush himself. The duel was swift and brutal. Lentes, older and outmatched, still fought with unmatched fury. Uther disarmed him and drove a spear into his abdomen. But Lentes didn't fall. With blood pouring from his wound, he staggered forward, pulled a dagger from his belt, and delivered a final, fatal blow to Uther. The two fell together, one dying to avenge his wife, the other never imagining he'd perish so dishonorably. Lentes' sacrifice cleared the path for Arthur, but his death would forever mark the young king's heart. Elsewhere, deep in the woods, a cloaked woman walked beneath the moonlight. Her steps were steady, her eyes determined. She found the one she had once traded with, the same devil Morgan had met. She shed her cloak and whispered into the dark, "I need more." But the darkness said nothing in return, only listened. With King Uther dead, Morgan's carefully laid plans collapsed. Her scheme to use Uther as a pawn to eliminate Arthur had failed. Now, she could only watch as Arthur, her half-brother, born of their father's secret affair, stood where she had dreamed of standing. Yet Arthur, ever merciful, offered her peace. "We could rule together," he said. "There's room for both of us." But Morgan's eyes burned with years of resentment. "For you, this is nothing. For me, it is everything," she replied. "Men have never been my path to power. I'll find another way." Meanwhile, deep within the untamed heart of the forest, Morgan Le Fay, his half-sister and a master of arcane arts, delved further into forbidden dealings with ancient darkness. Her path, entwined with vengeance and ambition, would soon collide with Arthur's destiny in ways that none could foresee. But the storm truly began with something far more intimate, a wound to the heart. 3 days from now, Arthur would stand witness as Lady Guinevere, the woman he adored beyond reason, was to marry not him, but his loyal guard, Sir Lentes. Guinevere had always imagined her future union with Lentes. They had grown up side by side, betrothed since childhood, surrounded by expectations and tradition. But the clarity of that future blurred the day she met King Uther. It wasn't just a chance encounter. It was a jolt to the soul. A man she had seen only from a distance now stood before her, stirring feelings she could not explain. The planned wedding at the castle brought with it tension. Neither Arthur nor Guinevere could fully hide their discomfort. The air was thick with unspoken words. At that very moment, Morgan struck. She sent her maid to extend a curious invitation. Arthur was asked to dine at her estate. Merlin, ever the vigilant guardian and wise seer, was wary. He had sensed Morgan's unrest since her departure from the castle. But Arthur, lost in sorrow, agreed without hesitation. Merlin, though distrustful, had little choice but to accompany him. Upon arrival at Morgan's castle, a different atmosphere greeted them. Morgan, adorned in regal garments and smiling graciously, welcomed them like honored guests. "I'm honored. Thank you," she said, with a grace that startled both men. To Merlin, her warmth was a performance, a play masking deeper schemes. Still, she had prepared a grand banquet, and although Merlin resisted the food, Morgan, with cunning poise, tasted Arthur's soup first to dispel any doubts. The dinner that followed was strangely serene. It lulled Arthur into a state of calm he had not known in days. Later that night, as moonlight blanketed the castle, Arthur dozed off in one of Morgan's chambers. But peace was an illusion. Morgan visited him in the quiet hours, no longer the dignified hostess, but a sister, seemingly seeking connection. She spoke softly, trying to peel back Arthur's guarded soul. He lowered his defenses, believing her intentions were sincere. Then came a curious moment. While tending to him, she claimed to accidentally cut his chest. In reality, she had drawn blood intentionally. Her ring, ancient and enchanted, absorbed a drop of his royal blood. And with that, she slipped away into the darkness of the hall. Merlin, who had remained in the main chamber, was still on edge. Morgan reappeared and offered him wine. At first, he refused, but her persistence wore him down. After a few drinks, a strange dizziness overtook him. His instincts screamed too late. He collapsed. But even in his haze, Merlin grasped a horrific truth. The childlike figure Morgan had used to disguise herself during the earlier poisoning was her younger form, an illusion of magic. It was she who had poisoned Arthur. By the time Merlin awoke, his hands and legs were bound. He was strapped to the bed, weakened but conscious. Morgan stood over him, collecting strands of his hair and clipping his nails, tools for a ritual older than time. "You poisoned your own father," Merlin whispered hoarsely, his voice laced with sorrow more than rage. Morgan's eyes burned. "He was never worthy of being my father." "You're lost," Merlin said gently. "This sorcery, it won't make you stronger. It will consume you." But Morgan was deaf to wisdom. Her thirst for power, her need to reclaim a throne she believed stolen from her, had overtaken reason. What neither of them knew was that Arthur, in his confusion and despair, had already left the castle by morning. That night, haunted by dreams of Guinevere, her laughter, her eyes, he made a fateful choice. He would confess everything. Meanwhile, Guinevere was preparing for her wedding. On the surface, she was the perfect bride, but in secret, she had procured deer's blood and hidden it beneath her bed. That night, she poured it onto the white sheets to preserve the illusion of purity. Because something had changed. Long before the wedding, before everything turned grim, she had met Arthur again. It happened at the beach, the same shore where they had first crossed paths. Arthur had appeared, trembling with emotion. "Tell me you're not thinking of me," he said, desperate. Guinevere struggled to hold back her feelings. "I'm getting married." "Don't," Arthur pleaded. "Are you telling me this as your king, or as someone who has only seen you twice but knows what love is?" Guinevere tried to resist, but Arthur saw through her silence. "You came here because you feel it too. Admit it." "Maybe." And then all pretenses fell away. They kissed. Time seemed to pause as they surrendered themselves to each other fully, not as king and lady, but as two souls starved for connection. But it was only for one night. Guinevere, torn by duty and guilt, said goodbye. Their secret would die with them, she vowed. She would still marry Lentus, out of loyalty, not love. On their return journey, they stumbled upon a wounded deer. Guinevere acted quickly, collecting its blood for the deception she had planned. The day of the wedding arrived. Arthur, now burdened with the knowledge of their night together, struggled to look Lentus in the eye. Worse, Lentus, loyal and proud, asked Arthur to officiate the ceremony. With a heavy heart, Arthur agreed. As the procession began, music swelled. Guinevere, radiant in white, entered the room beside her father. She passed Arthur, her eyes briefly meeting his, and then stood before Lentus, who waited with joy. Arthur swallowed his sorrow. He lifted the ceremonial rings and spoke, each word like a blade to the heart. "May these rings stand forever as a symbol of your unity and fidelity. May you live and grow old together, knowing only the truth of undying love." Guinevere said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. But in the shadows, away from the lights of celebration, Morgan began her final act. Using the blood drawn from Arthur, she performed dark rituals. By tapping into the king's essence, she accessed his memories, his secrets, his very soul. Now, she knew the love he held for Guinevere, the betrayal, the guilt, the sorrow. And with that knowledge, Morgan's power grew, her grasp over Arthur's fate tightening like a noose. The wheel of destiny had begun to turn, and no one, not Merlin, not Guinevere, not even Arthur, could stop what was coming next.